Led Zeppelin worked non-stop from 1968 through 1973. 5 years of hard work. Recording, album release, touring, rinse and repeat. They played 469 shows at a rate of 93 per year. Their longest time off the stage was 3 months at the most. Tired of their grueling touring schedule, John Paul Jones thought about quitting Led Zeppelin in late 1973. Peter Grant intervened and the band wouldn't return on stage for a year and a half, their longest break up to that point. Robert had vocal voice surgery for nodules, his range dropped and took many years to recover. October 1973. Jimmy and Bonzo started working on a new musical idea. The group reconvened at Headley Grange to record 8 new songs throughout January and February. Progressive rock's Genesis would follow in August to write their next album, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Upon their arrival at Headley Grange, Genesis stated the place been left in a very poor state by the previous act, filthy floors and rat-infested halls. Atlantic Records' 5-album deal contract expired and Zeppelin did not renew it. They set up their own record label with a prophetic name, Swan Song. Launch parties took place in New York, Los Angeles and the UK. The new label's artist roster included soon-to-be famous rock powerhouse, Bad Company. Atlantic had a corporate structure of people getting the job done. The band's independence came with big responsibilities. Swan Song was like a curse waiting to happen with the infamous logo representing Icarus. Greek mythology explains, fly neither too low nor too high, Icarus ignored his father's instructions not to fly too close to the sun, causing the wax in his wings to melt. He tumbled out of the sky, fell into the sea, and drowned. August 1974. After reviewing their Madison Square Garden shows, there were crucial holes in the concert footage. Big portions of the songs were missing. They decided on a very complicated and ambitious idea to fill in the gaps. Recreate their stage at Shepperton Studios and shoot close-ups. The band had to mime their performances to audio recordings. Additional filming was done through September, including added sequences that would make use of its cinematic release. Once everything was shot, movie plans were shelved and left in the archives. November 1974. Led Zeppelin's tour was announced. Some shows like 3 nights at Madison Square Garden sold out in a record-breaking 36 hours. Ozone Baby was the first track laid down at Polar. It was a good warm-up and allowed them to get comfortable in the studio. Bonham's drums drive the song's multiple sections and rhythm changes. Vocals were recorded in 1982 when it was remixed for its release on their posthumous Coda album. The band at the epitome of success. They toured the United States from January 18th till March 27th. The concert run began with Robert and a bad case of influenza which affected his singing. This would be recurring throughout their concert series that year. Jimmy suffered a broken ring finger, forcing him to take painkillers. The rhythm section featured a short-haired Jones and Bonham on a drum riser for the first time. February 3rd. Atlantic Records hosted a party for 200 guests including Andy Warhol, Keith Moon and a young newcomer journalist, Cameron Crowe. He would follow the band on tour for a Rolling Stone article, and later use some of his experiences as the basis for his 2000 Almost Famous movie.
All right, Mr. Jimmy Page, Mr. John Paul Jones, Mr. Robert Plant, Mr. Robert Plant signed my T-shirt 5 minutes ago. Please don't smear it. No, please don't smear it. But 5 minutes ago, he touched this pen.
February 24th. Physical Graffiti was released as 14-track double album. The record included 6 archived songs from 1970 through 1972, in an attempt to make Robert's new vocal sound not too noticeable for fans. Had they only used their 1974 sessions, it would have been the perfect Zeppelin record. The band returned to England and played 5 sold-out shows at Earl's Court from May 17th to May 25th. Jimmy showed his brand new dragon suit. Led Zeppelin took some time off before going back to the States in August. The band planned to film and record their autumn dates for their pending movie project. July 7th. Peter Grant and West Coast promoter Bill Graham announced 2 shows scheduled for August at San Francisco's Oakland Coliseum. July 11th, John Paul Jones performs with Etta James Band at Montreux. August 4th, 1975, Rhodes Island, Greece. Robert and his family plus Jimmy's daughter Scarlett rode in the front car. Jimmy and wife Charlotte drove behind them. Plant's wife lost control of the vehicle and crashed. Robert broke his leg and ankle. Maureen suffered a lengthy period of concussions and broke her leg in several places. Plant's son, Karak, age 4, suffered a fractured leg and cuts. His daughter, Carmen, age 7, had a broken wrist and bruises. Scarlett Page was unharmed. Because of England's high tax policy at the time, Robert had to go into tax exile in France. He would join Page months later in Malibu to write songs. Robert was in a wheelchair. He was told by doctors he may never walk again. The Zeppelin machine shut down, the US tour was cancelled, winter dates in various countries including Japan were also cancelled. A lot of money was left on the table. The band began to question its mortality. Robert grasped the concept of existence. Greece was a wake-up call. The intro features Jimmy Page's architectural vision through guitar layer sounds. First off, the Gizmotron, an effects device taped or permanently attached to the body of the electric guitar. The Gizmotron used a small motor-driven plastic with rubber wheels that emulate a fast-picking guitar technique and vibration. It was invented in 1969 by English rock musicians Kevin Godley and Lowell Creme, who would later be a part of British rock group 10cc. The device was patented in 1975 and released to the public in 1979. Despite their best wishes, the product was plagued with design and manufacturing problems. It was a commercial failure, yet it provided Jimmy with a modern tool for the album. The second layer of guitar is comprised of Jimmy's signature violin bow for a drone effect. Page used this texture on his 1973 soundtrack for Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising movie, as well as Autumn Lakes, a small composition briefly heard in the opening sequence from the song remains the same. It's no surprise Jimmy used his 1979 guitar solo spot to carry audiences into in the evening, using his violin bow as cue or signal. Bonham came in with his timpani drums plus a flanger effect. Bonzo was a fan of electronics and percussion. You can hear this on live versions of Moby Dick from 1975 and 1977. The eerie vibe texture is a fitting vehicle for Plant's vocals, as he announces the song's title. The energy feels fresh. Zeppelin at the gate of the 80s crowning their effect in full force. Jones' bass work shines along his GX1 keyboard motif. If the intro feels familiar, it's because it is. Drawing heavily from Zeppelin's much preferred EDA chord structure featured on their debut album, In the Evening is a mid-tempo return to the starting point, with a different lens and perspective. Like Good Times Bad Times, there's a well-crafted pop song underneath. Past a firing guitar solo, we are treated to a delightful slow section in between it all. Early takes of the song had John Paul Jones playing a melody that was later discarded in the studio, but would remain in all live versions. Jimmy Page played a Stratocaster guitar on this track with great embellishments in the ways of overdub harmonies and dive bombs that would accidentally inspire the coming 80s hair metal style. A classic album opener for sure, the sound of a new decade. October 1975. Jones and Bonham joined their bandmates in Malibu. They rehearsed new material at SIR Studios in Los Angeles. Jimmy led the way in composition, coming up with all the songs. November 1975. The band flew to the cold streets of West Germany to record their next album at Musicland Studios. Musicland was established by Italian disco and electronic music pioneer Giorgio Moroder in the early 70s.
My name is Giovanni Giorgio, but everybody calls me Giorgio.
The studio was situated in the basement of the Arabella high-rise building, which Robert found claustrophobic and recorded his vocals on a wheelchair. Musicland had a very busy recording schedule that year. February 20th to March 14th, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow debut album. May till June, Electric Light Orchestra's fifth studio album, Face the Music. August 3rd to September 1st, Deep Purple's Come Taste the Band, featuring Tommy Bolin on guitar. Bolin was also living in Malibu at the time. Pictures of him hanging out with Robert Plant confirm his popularity in rock and jazz fusion realms. His old band Zephyr was Led Zeppelin's opening act for their three famous shows at the Boston Tea Party in May 1969. The Rolling Stones were in the midst of their Black and Blue recording sessions. Mick Taylor quit the band in late '74 and they were looking for a replacement. Both Rory Gallagher and Jeff Beck turned down the offer. Because they booked 14 days in December, Jimmy Page had to work 18-hour days against the clock before the Stones came to Musicland. Final mixes for Presents were done on November 30th. The new album had no keyboards, no light and shade, just shade. It remains one of the most complex works in their catalogue. Recording kept them busy throughout November. Thanksgiving was a temporary title for the album. Rock stars awake asleep in the comfort of impulse and isolation. December 16, 1975. The band played a 45-minute rockabilly impromptu set at British Jersey Island, where an injured Robert Plant sat on a stool during the gig. He'd make progress and could walk again with the assistance of crutches, while having to rest his leg occasionally. January 1976. Paul McCartney was an admirer of John Bonham's drumming and Bonzo loved Wings. He invited him for the Speed of Sound sessions. The Led Zepp Sticksman lent his talent to the track Beware My Love. For reasons unknown, McCartney left it off the final album. He went with Wings drummer Joe English's take.
So we went to Munich and made an album called Presents, which...
March 31st. Their 7-song album Presents was released to mixed reviews and low sales numbers. The album cover was fitting, a black monolith asking an imposing question. Famous filmmaker and occultist Kenneth Angus stayed at Jimmy's house at the time. He worked on editing for his Lucifer Rising movie. Anger commissioned a 40-minute soundtrack. Page had only recorded 20 minutes of music. Kenneth was furious. The disagreement hit Jimmy's wife Charlotte, throwing him out of the house, and the artistic collaboration was off. Anger went on to the press and said that Page was a heroin addict and a dried-up musician. He publicly threw the Kenneth Anger curse over Jimmy. September 9th. Page and Bonham traveled to Montreux to hang out with Keith Richards and the Stones' entourage. In between the madness, they recorded a song at Mountain Studios. The orchestrated drum solo piece by Bonham was left in their archives for many years. Mountain Studios was also home for 2 other fellow British rock bands at the time. Emerson, Lake and Palmer held sessions for Works Volume 1 throughout the year. Yes arrived in October to record their Going for the One album. This marked the return of keyboard wizard Rick Wakeman into the lineup.
A journey out of the extraordinary into the fantastic. Led Zeppelin in concert and beyond. Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, John Bonham.
September 24th saw the premiere of The Song Remains the Same, a concert film and soundtrack comprised of 3 shows from 1973. The movie was celebrated by fans who desperately wanted to see them on stage. Official premieres were held in New York, Los Angeles, London, and Birmingham. Once called the most expensive homemade film ever, it became a cult classic and inspired many musicians across the globe.
South Bands Warriors is a reminiscent of, I suppose, about 5 o'clock in the morning in New Orleans. I'm wishing you got the strength you had at 9 a.m. Yes. It's one of them. But it's a real good one. It's a nice belting thing.
Recording at ABBA's studio may have had something to do with the energy for this track, judging by Jones' keyboard work. The joyfulness and optimism is contagious. It is speculated that the title may contain a typographical error, as the word soirées may have been an English attempt at spelling soirée, a French word for evening party. This would make sense as the song is preceded by In the Evening on the final track list. The lyrics talk about flying down southbound, as well as the phrase sweet con carne, a Spanish term for a dish prepared with beef and popular pastry recipe in both Chile and Argentina. We could think that the 1978 World Cup was an influence with qualifying teams Mexico, Brazil, Peru and Argentina. Zeppelin's South American mystery remains. If you listen closely, you come to realize the song's beat is a reverse take on Whole Lotta Love's drum groove. Also noticeable is a possible hi-hat overdub on this track, as seen from the recording notes. This extra layer provided stronger groove and dynamics. Bonham could have recorded this by hitting the hi-hat for the entirety of the song. Jimmy's guitar licks and solo, plus the song's C major to A major main theme, are reminiscent of another Zepp classic. Jones used a Yamaha CP70 piano at Polar Studios to great effect, adding leads and colors going back to the old ballroom dancing days.